you're going to treat those customers like gold, right? You've got to just service the hell out of them because you want to retain them because you're playing a 5 to 15 year game now. If it is something that we can maintain or we can fix, then we've saved them a huge expense today and we've gotten their trust. So we want our guys to slow down and really look. And it's not like, oh, we're going to look and like change 1,000 capacitors. That's not the plan. The plan is deliver real value.
Hello, friends. I'm Adam Loveridge, and welcome to the Home Services Marketing Podcast, From Growth to Acquisition. I'm the owner and founder of Blue Forge Marketing. We are a home services marketing agency specializing in heating and air conditioning, plumbing, remodeling, and garage door contractors. For more information about Blue Forge Marketing, visit us online at blueforgemarketing.com. Hello and welcome to the Home Services Marketing Podcast, From Growth to Acquisition. My name is Adam Loveridge with Blue Forge Marketing. I'm being joined here today by Viktor Hyman with Climate Care, and they are out of Toronto, Ontario. Viktor, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Hey, it's my pleasure to be here with you, Adam.
It's my pleasure to have you. I'm really excited about this particular episode, Viktor, because we talk about private equity quite a bit in this particular show, right? As as we're talking about really that sort of life cycle all the way from growth companies to acquisition. I know that what Climate Care does is maybe similar in some ways to private equity, but also you define yourself as being very anti-private equity. And I think that what you guys are doing is just such a credible solution for the mom and pop HVAC contractors that want to build a brand, that want to value their employees, that may still want to sell at some point in the future, but don't want to come in and get chopped apart and see their legacy essentially just get packaged up to get resold at some point in the future. So I'm really, really looking forward to getting involved in in some of these conversations and hearing what some of those alternative approaches are. But before we really dive into that, tell me a little bit about you, how you got started in the HVAC industry, and then ultimately how you wound up at Climate Care.
I have a kind of a funny entry point. I was not in HVAC. I was doing some startup work, and a mutual friend introduced me to two brothers who owned their own residential light commercial business back in 2005. And they've been going for about 10 years. They were successful, but like many mom and pop operations, they were good on the tools. Running the business was not really in their skill set, and they needed help building out systems and procedures. So I got involved there purely from a process standpoint, not having ever done anything in HVAC. I didn't know what HVAC meant. And I came in and I said, listen, what I want you to do is share with me your problems, your issues, and we'll tackle them one at a time. We'll figure out how we can professionalize this and build out processes. And I was there for a number of years. Along the way, we got introduced to Climate Care in 2008. Climate Care was growing and looking for new members, and we were approached. And I thought, okay, like what are they going to tell me that we don't already know? And I went to one of the general meetings, and I was absolutely blown away. I saw the camaraderie of this group, the willingness for them to share their best practices and their challenges and all the things that they had already done with people that were potentially their competitors. We're all in Ontario, so companies overlapping territories was and continues to be something that we have. But that willingness to share, that really intrigued me. So I started going to the quarterly meetings as an employee of that company that I had joined. And after 5 years there, it was time for me to move on. My brother had a startup business, and he said, I want you to come and do for me what you did for Joe and Jack. And I thought, okay, this will be fun. We can do this. I can help him build his business. I had been an angel investor with him. He had started to get to a size that he needed the help. And it is one of those moments where, I should have listened to my wife. I said, are you sure you want to do this? And of course, it'd be great. I should have known better. I should have listened to her. After 5 years of working with two brothers, I should have realized you need to have somebody in there who can moderate between those competing forces. And I didn't have a moderator with my brother. So it was, a case of last in, first out. I came in, I was there for a few months. I said, okay, this is not going to work. We're going to kill each other. And so I knew I wanted to get back into the HVAC industry, but I didn't know where. So I went to a job board at HRAI, which is the Canadian version of AHRI for those watching in the States. And I started to look through, what companies are hiring. I saw this management development program at a company called EMCO, which is the Canadian sister company of Hajoka in the US. Hajoka has the same management development program. And I was intrigued, but it was for people that were like just out of school. So like, oh, this isn't going to work. Anyway, but half an hour later, my phone rang, and it was a manager at EMCO who had gotten my name from Joe and Jack. So that was my first lesson, don't burn any bridges. EMCO had become a supplier to Climate Care, and they were at a general meeting, and they shared that they were looking for somebody to do business development. And Joe and Jack recommended me. And so I was intrigued with the business model at EMCO, and I ended up spending the next 9 years there. It was fantastic. And because I had a connection to Climate Care, I became responsible for the Climate Care business. We grew it 10x about 5 years, just by doing proper account management. I took on a bunch of different roles. I was in national procurement on the HVAC side. At one point, I opened a new location for the business outside of Toronto. And then ultimately, I started a leasing business for contractors. So Ontario is a unique market in North America that HVAC rental it started here in Ontario. It started with water heater rentals. We had two big incumbent utilities, gas utilities, that were renting water heaters back in the 1950s. They eventually got spun out as standalone companies, became Enercare and Reliance. And if you want to sell water heaters as a distributor into the residential new construction market in Ontario, you have to have a rental program. Almost every single water heater sold in Ontario in new construction is rental. So I developed this rental program, and it was starting to get going. We're about a year in, and then COVID hit. And I had a flashback to the 1990s. I was in high school in the 90s, early 90s. Then recession hit in 91, 92. And I remember coming home from school, turning on the 6 o'clock news. I don't know if anybody does that anymore. And watching these middle-aged guys carrying out all their personal belongings, right, out of their offices, like look like deer in the headlights. What happened? Oh, they laid off everybody on my floor today, right? It's
Yeah.
like, oh, that sucks to be them. As a looking at that as a 17-year-old. Anyway, fast forward, 30 years, and there I was. My job got COVID. Was carrying out my personal belongings. So I was again, fortunate. One door closes, another one opens, and Climate Care, which I had had this connection with since 2008, was looking for a new executive director. I understood the business pretty well. I'd seen it from a couple of different sides, and ultimately, I got the job, and I landed within 3 months. I went from my COVID hiatus, May, June, July, and beginning of August 2020, I started with Climate Care in this role.
Fantastic. And tell me a little bit more about what is Climate Care and what do you do?
So Climate Care is unique. We are a cooperative of residential home comfort retailers. That's what we call ourselves, home comfort retailers. Residential service maintenance and retrofit HVAC contractors. Our businesses range in size from about $2 million to $20 million in revenue. Spread out across Ontario. Ontario, for our American listeners, would be geographically the size of like New York or Pennsylvania, although most of the population is in a pretty narrow band in southern Ontario. And we're about population about 14, 15 million people. So pretty decent size economy, and our members cover a good chunk of that ground. So what makes us unique is that we have this cooperative structure. And cooperatives are not really well known. I mean, I guess if you live in New York in an apartment, you might live in a cooperative. People know about housing co-ops. Banks, in the banking space, credit unions are cooperatives. In the farming space, farming co-ops are a thing, right? That's pretty well known. But in the consumer space, it's less well known. So what makes us unique is that as an organization with 35 locations, a couple $100 million in revenue, that makes us one of the four biggest residential contractors in Ontario. But we're owned by our individual companies. So each company that is a member of the co-op owns a share in the co-op, and they earn equity in the co-op. So they are able to participate in the upside. As we grow the co-op, as we bring on more members, as we increase our revenue, we are able to share that wealth back to our member company. So it doesn't roll up to a private equity fund. The profits don't roll up to a franchisor. They go to the folks who actually own it. And so we have these, 30 odd businesses across Ontario that participate by buying through the cooperative, through our buying programs. They participate with marketing, um, training, and peer support, and they get back, cash values. They get back in-kind value. We try to turnkey things for them, and that's what makes us different. Is I like to liken us to a buffet,
Mm.
a nice buffet, a white tablecloth buffet. There's lots of opportunity there. Our job at
Not
the
your
co-op head
standard Las
office.
Vegas, casino
Yeah,
buffet.
no, we're not. You're not going to get food poisoning at our buffet. I hope.
That's good.
Um, no, but the opportunity is, these are things that we have for you: the training, the marketing, the peer support, and you choose what you want to use. So we have some members that really dive in. They get everything. They really are interested in maximizing the value they get out of the co-op, and others are, there's one or two things that they really like. Um, and it's a co-op, so they have the freedom to do that. That's a feature, not a bug. Unlike a franchise where it's dictated, you will run the program like this. This is how much you have to spend on marketing. This is how you will market. This is what you will sell. In our business, because they are the owners ultimately of the co-op, we have committees that make those recommendations. So we have a marketing committee, we have a training committee, we have a purchasing committee that informs our negotiation with vendors. And we have a membership committee. We have a committee of members that will decide whether or not somebody should join us, right, along the way. So it's very from the roots up. Like, it's really about our members' participation. That's the most important thing. It's our members first. And then at head office, which is a team of about 10 people, um, we are there to provide value. And that means that, we've got a marketing and implementation manager who is really helping them, looking at their marketing and picking from the buffet of what would be the right thing. Is it digital? Is it print? Is it billboard? Getting the graphic design done for them, which we can do in-house, and understanding their metrics and where is the best place for them to be spending on their marketing. So that's one aspect of things. We have we do a lot of coaching, helping them understand their numbers, right? And
Sure.
what are the KPIs? How do they know if they're successful? And what do they want to ultimately achieve? And this is something that's happened in the last few years, um, because of the private equity consolidation run, which in Canada has been a little bit different than in the U.S. But we've been around since 1992, so we were there for the first roll up, which was the Service Experts roll up that happened in the 90s. That took off. One of our founding members, as a matter of fact, became a Service Experts location within just a few years of starting the co-op. And so we've seen that. We've seen, we've had ringside seats. We've seen what happens after the first bite of the apple, and then the second turn, and then your three owners in, and what's happened to the business. So we see that, and we can really use that to inform what our decision making process is for how we should guide the co-op, where we're a little bit more patient. We're not trying to take this business and sell it again in 3 or 5 years. We're trying to build long-term enduring value and help build multi-generational middle-class wealth. That's really what we're trying to achieve. And so I think we've been successful with it in the last few years as we've gone through another round of consolidation. And after private equity has picked the bones dry in the U.S., then they turn to Canada and say, oh, what's the opportunity look like up there? So we've had a couple of folks cross our border hedge, and come and poke around and see what's possible. I don't think they've had the same level of success because, as much as we speak the same language, and Canada and the U.S., we share a lot culturally. I think there's a different approach to business in Canada than in the U.S. And for our climate care members, there's this real sense of community and giving back, and valuing their employees and their legacy that they've built in their communities and their customers. And I joke with them sometimes, they value their customers so much, sometimes to a fault, right? Like I was on the wholesale side selling to climate care for a number of years. And what I realized was you don't want to sell them anything that you don't want to have to take back, because if there's a problem, if their customer installs a product, if one of our customers installs a product, we're going to give 100% satisfaction guarantee for the first year, which is not, a lot of people market it, but we actually mean it. Like if somebody's not happy, we will rip it out and we'll replace it at our cost, which means that our vendor partners have to know that's part of the deal, right? Like if this thing, don't tell me it's got a no hassle warranty and you'll give me a new heat exchanger. If the heat exchanger fails in the first year, that's a very unusual case. Compressor dies in the first year, we're going to rip the whole thing out and replace it. And you better be there to help us because that's the value proposition that we bring. And we're going to be, we want to do the right thing for the customer. So I joke sometimes, it's like, guys, like, yeah, that's great, but that customer bought it 5 years ago. Like we passed that mark, but they're still like, they want to, it's all about doing the right thing for the customer.
In particular, I really like the idea that it seems like the major difference, and correct me if I'm wrong here anyway, is that when I'm working with a private equity group, and I know that not all private equity is this way. In fact, I did an interview a little while back with somebody that was purchased by a group called Leap Service Partners, that they're down in the southeast, I want to say, here in the United States, and they take a pretty good approach to really helping to grow that business and be a reliable partner and asset, and eventually help them exit at a higher multiplier of EBITDA, that sort of thing. But those stories are kind of few and far between. And I was sharing with you earlier, we had some experience with a private equity firm working with one of our clients, and I won't mention who, just for anonymity's sake, I guess
Mm-hmm.
you could say. But in any event, a group that we had helped really expand, in their local market, and top line revenue and EBITDA and everything else, because it made them such an attractive target for acquisition, and the owner had some other compelling reasons to leave. They ended up selling to a group that at the time anyway had about 18 brands underneath their umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
And what was fascinating to me is they getting to kind of work on the inside of it, and work directly with this PE firm. What we found was that, number one, they came in and really wanted to sort of take over all the marketing. So, almost immediately after the company that we had been working with for 3 years and had done phenomenal work for was sold, we got fired. Okay, and we were out the door. And frankly, the only reason that we got pulled back in by the private equity firm was because about 6 months later, they had brought in one of their entrenched vendors, which is kind of what they try to do. And I realize that they're trying to get, gain efficiencies and things along these lines, but they brought an entrenched vendor. That entrenched vendor managed to just actually, drive their SEO into the ground along with their lead flow. And we got invited back in to come help turn it around. We were able to do so, and eventually realized that it was phenomenally challenging to work with private equity groups, primarily because what ends up happening, and what we saw happen at least, was that all of the people who were making decisions about the marketing before, that were working inside of the business, and really knew what the culture of that business was, whatever else, and had built that to where it was. They kind of just got sent out the door as everything got consolidated and rolled up. And so what we then found was that process then put in charge people whose sole really focus was to dominate that local market, and literally use, like, run up ad spend, push everybody else that's not part of the big PE firm out of the marketplace, and and ultimately just throw a bunch of ad revenue at it. And at the end of the day, the other thing that was happening too is that we never knew who we were supposed to be working with, because they were growing so fast and they had so many layers of bureaucracy that came in, that it was almost impossible to just make basic decisions about how we should move forward. And so that was a horror story for us in terms of, private equity. And I know that that's not really, having them come in and start chopping everything apart is something that pretty happens routinely. So from the perspective of somebody who might be looking to sell their business, what is the difference really then between something like Climate Care and the traditional private equity route?
Yeah, I think you really said it well. And the challenges of private equity, they're not in the HVAC business. They're in the business of buying and selling businesses. And so they want to, what they're trying to do is turn that into something that generates a lot of cash, so that they can get the EBITDA up, so they can flip it to the next buyer at a higher multiple. That's the business that private equity is in. And, that's okay. I mean, I buy and sell stock, right?
Sure.
In the public, right? Listed on the public exchanges. They do it privately, right? So they're buying and selling companies. But what it means is that as a business owner, going from growth to acquisition, if you built your business by living your core values, right? And if you built your business because of your core values, not in spite of your core values, you were successful because you did the things that are actually written on the wall that you say is important to you, then you want to make sure that whoever is buying that business share those core values if you actually care about your legacy. Some people don't care about their legacy. It's interesting. I talk to some business owners and they just want to ring the register and leave, right? And
Right.
I say, like, okay, I mean, if your name is on the building, you might want to make sure you're leaving town, because you're going to discover that a buyer with a certain kind of mentality isn't going to necessarily protect your legacy. But if you find a buyer, and it could be private equity. I mean, in the States, there's dozens of private equity groups. So I don't want to paint them all with the same brush. But I think it's really important that when you're growing your business, you understand what's important to you. What are those values? And that's where I would start. Like, what is really important to me as a business owner? What am I trying to achieve? And if it's my people, my community, the value that I bring to my customers, if that's part of it, then you want to make sure that um, that the person buying your business, or the entity buying your business, share those values. The good news is, in the US at least, there are a lot of buyers chasing deals, right? So if you're an independent, I wouldn't take the first private equity deal that knocks on the door. There's literally dozens of people there. And I would really spend the time doing the due diligence to see if you can find one that shares your values, and ask for references. You want to talk to people who sold the business a year, 2, 3 years ago, and see, are they happy with how that worked? What was their retention of their headcount? Did they upset the apple cart? And it's funny because of the example that you brought, you had a successful business. Your client was a successful business. They were obviously doing something right, that this private equity group said, we want that, right? But then
Right.
they proceeded to destroy it, right? Because they weren't really interested in how it operates. They're only interested in the end result in this case. So
Sure.
I think it's a good lesson for people that are going to market their business. So what we do differently at Climate Care is we really lead with our values, right? And we've
Sure.
been around long enough to see what happens when companies sell to vendors, or sorry, to acquirers that don't share their values. Um, Things don't end up necessarily working out the way they want them to. So they may have rung the register, they may have gotten paid out. It's important to understand, what are you getting paid the day you close, and what are you getting paid down the road. If there's a residual payment, how, again,
Earn
ask
out
for
kind of thing
references,
there.
right? An earnout. How many of the previous sellers have actually achieved the earnout that they were told that was possible? These are the kinds of things to ask about. But what happened differently at Climate Care after going through this, a few times. As I mentioned, one of our founding members became a service experts location. So we've been through a number of rounds of consolidation. We've had members leave us and be part of roll-ups. We've had members sell their businesses to the next generation of independent owners and stay in the co-op. And we've had people sell their businesses and leave the co-op. The door swings in both directions. But a couple of years ago, private equity had picked over all the bones in the U.S. and started to come up here, and we were an attractive target because, like I said, we're 35 locations, a couple $100 million in revenue. We've got a platform already, and so a number of groups came and thought that they could just acquire the co-op. Okay, that's not the way it works. That's not really something that's possible for all kinds of reasons. What our board realized was, and our board is made up of our owners, our member owners, 7 member owners, and what our board realized was we need a strategy. Like, it's not enough to say you shouldn't do this. If somebody's coming with a check in hand and you're ready to retire, it's very hard to say no, right?
Sure.
And you need to have an exit plan. So we built what we call our Navigator program. And the Navigator program was, starting with the end in mind. At some point you're going to want to retire, right? And you're going to have a certain number in mind that you need to retire. And so the question is, wherever your business is today, how do we get you to that number in the number of years that you have left, right? So if it's 5 years, if it's 10 years, how much time do you have left? What do you want to get to? Where are you today? Let's build a plan, right? And so we work with our members. We do a blueprint, and then we do a plan for what do they need to achieve. And we support them with marketing, coaching, training, peer support to get to that goal. And then what we did was we said, it's a co-op. There's no right of first refusal here. You're not obligated to sell to the cooperative. If you want to sell to your kids, that would be the best. We would love to see a second, third, even fourth generation business. We have businesses in climate care that are in their third generation owner in the same family. We have some businesses that are second, third generation, not the same family. They've sold to their employees and sold to their employees and sold to their employees, which is awesome. It's amazing, right? The people doing the work buy the business. We love it. That is really, it makes us very satisfied to know that they've been able to exit the business and leave it in the hands of somebody that they really trust and love in many cases, which is wonderful. And in some cases, that's not going to work. They're going to need to find an outside buyer. That's okay. We want them to, see is there, when they understand what their value proposition is and what the buyer has in mind, can they find a buyer that would do what they need? And then the last option, and this was the new piece, was that the co-op would buy the business. So if they followed the climate care playbook, they developed a business that's focused on residential service maintenance and retrofit. They've built, recurring revenue stream through what we call our We Care plans. They've done all of those things. They have a manager in place so there's continuity. We want to buy a business that will continue to run without the owner. They've made themselves redundant. Then we would make that acquisition, and we would do it at a fair valuation. So if they took it to auction, could they get a better price? Maybe, but here they're going to be guaranteed that the co-op is going to share their values, and it's going to be a fair price for both parties. And so we closed our first deal last month. We bought Canco Climate Care in Newmarket. That was started 40 years ago by Bob and Nancy McCarrigan. And Bob and Nancy built a very nice business up in Newmarket that's really valued in the community. When they had their 40th anniversary celebration, customers came. I was shocked. I was near Ottawa doing a day of strategic planning with one of our members, and I knew it was the 40th anniversary of Canco, so I had to drive halfway across the province to get to Canco, and I thought, oh, for sure I'm going to miss it, right? And I walked in, I think it was called from 4 to 7 or something, and I walked in at 7:30, and the place was packed with customers who were coming to wish Bob and Nancy congratulations on 40 years. And for me, that was okay, this is the right business to buy. These people are entrenched in their community. They're loved by their customers. So we bought Canco. We closed on it last month. It's our first acquisition. And after we closed, Bob said to me, and it wasn't really a surprise, but it was, I can appreciate he wasn't going to tell me this before the ink was dry and the money had transferred. He said, Nancy and I discussed it, and if we hadn't sold to the co-op, we would have just closed down the business because we couldn't imagine selling it to somebody or another organization that didn't share our values. And we know that selling it to the co-op means that our legacies can be protected. So I think even if he had told me that, we still would have paid what we paid because the intention here is, to help our members exit, and we want to be transparent. And that's the difference. And so I guess what I would love to see is, another Canadian HVAC export. So unfortunately, we exported rental HVAC from Ontario to the rest of North America. We don't necessarily export the best business ideas.
No, but before we move on from that,
Yeah.
tell me explain rental HVAC, because this is a term that's new to me.
Canada, Ontario had 2 monopoly gas utilities going back to the 1950s. And those 2 utilities at some point realized that if they would provide a water heater to the builder for free, they could guarantee that there would be a gas appliance in the home. So as natural gas was starting to expand, they wanted to expand their network. They had subdivisions popping up in Ontario. They wanted to make sure that the builder would put natural gas into the home. That was really what they were interested in, was selling natural gas. So somebody came up with the idea of renting the water heater. So they give it to the builder for free. The builder would install it. They would say whatever that cost in the 1950s, 25 cents, I'm not sure. And then they would rent the water heater to the homeowner for $1 a month. And really what they were interested in was not so much the recurring revenue on the water heater, but the gas. Now you've got a gas appliance in the home, you're going to have to use natural gas. So this continued for 40 years into the 1990s. And irony of ironies, it was some of the climate care members who basically created this thing called HVAC Coalition at the time, HVAC Coalition. And it was to force the gas utilities to divest their rental business because by the time we got 40 years in, every single water heater sold in new construction in Ontario was a rental.
Hmm.
And the rental companies controlled 80% of the water heater business in Ontario. If you're really interested in doing a deep dive, you could like Google the water heater rental wars. There's been a lot of ink spilt in Ontario about this over the years. But what happened was in the late 90s, they were forced by the utility, the Ontario Energy Board, which is the utility regulator, to divest this asset. So the two gas utilities had to spin out their water heater rental businesses. Those ultimately became Enercare, which owns Service Experts now, which is owned by Brookfield, and Reliance, which owns some businesses in the US and is owned by CKA Holdings. So we've got these two multi-billion-dollar HVAC companies, the largest, they're for sure the two largest residential HVAC companies in North America. They're spinouts of these gas utilities, and they've gone through a few ownership cycles. But what happened was in the early 2000s, somebody realized, hey, if we could rent HVAC, furnaces and air conditioners, the average ticket for the rental would be 3-4 times what it is for a water heater, right? And so that became a huge new revenue stream, and they got very good at convincing consumers that they should rent their furnaces and air conditioners. I know it sounds, if you're not in a market that has this going on, you're like, that sounds absolutely crazy. Why would I rent it? I can buy it. But in Ontario, a huge percentage of people rent their water heaters and rent their HVAC. And it makes it very hard for independents to get in because the rental contracts are designed to make it very hard to end the rental contract. Um, and and then Enercare did such a good job at it, they bought Service Experts so that they could, in 2000, I think it was 2015, so that they could take their rental program, which they called their Advantage program, and take it to the US. And that's what they've done. So if you're a Service Experts location, then there's an expectation that a certain percentage of your sales are going to be rentals.
Okay. Okay. That makes, thank you for clarifying that because
It's a little crazy. I mean, but understanding the math, uh, understanding the math, what's interesting is that they look at it basically as a convertible debenture, right? So they've got this revenue stream. It's inflation protected because they raise the price every year of the rental.
right,
Um,
right.
and they raise the price by, the inflation rate plus a couple points, right? In some cases. So you could get 5%, 6%, depending on what inflation is running, annual increases. And the rental contracts go on indefinitely. They're forever contracts in most cases. So for the rental company, it is absolutely incredible. For the consumer, not so much. And so
Hmm.
that's an interesting thing that we exported. And I'm hoping that one of the things that we're able to export from Canada on the HVAC side isn't just rental HVAC, but the idea of cooperatives. I think that the co-op model is worth exporting. Um, Independent businesses that come together for a common goal of helping them grow their own businesses. As I like to say, our mission at Climate Care is to help you have more fun and make more money so you can have a business you want to own and ultimately somebody wants to buy. The beauty of this is, like-minded businesses coming together, and that can be in whatever size geography. It helps if they're in the same region. And you can build your own rules, right? You want to say that, we're going to limit the number of people we have based on population, or territories. The co-op is free to make those kinds of rules. But the opportunity to get together and to work collaboratively is pretty wild. I see it every day. Our members send an email to our internal email relay asking questions about their business, things that you would typically not ask a competitor, advice. I had one today. There was a question. One of our members sent out an email asking, does anybody know about programs to help municipalities convert their own small municipal buildings from oil to heat pumps? And you would think like that's not necessarily a question I want to ask in a room of competitors because everybody knows what market I'm in. Maybe they're going to take that idea and take it to my market. But in climate care, we that's not how we operate. If Vaughn figures out a good opportunity, he's going to share it with the group. You know what? Somebody's going to share, yeah, I've done this, I've did this, or let me give you some ideas of how you can do this. And if he's successful, he'll bring it back and share the idea with other members. And that's how we grow together.
Now, I'm curious if you know if there are cooperatives like this that are starting to spring up in the States.
I've spoken to a number of people at business accelerators in the US
Hmm.
that have had this idea. I don't think at the moment anybody has started one, but there's been some chatter. Folks that have reached out to say that they're interested in doing it. I think that it's a tremendous opportunity. I think that we happen to have what I call a kumbaya capitalism kind of mentality. Others have a more rapacious kind of capitalist mentality. We all like to get along. I think that all you need to get started, and we started with 6 companies almost 35 years ago. All you need is a couple of business owners to say, you know what, we're not going to collude, we're not going to break competition laws, but we're going to share best practices. We're going to create a buying group. We're going to share and pool our marketing, for example. And to get it started, putting together some bylaws and what does this group look like? What are we trying to achieve? It's not that hard. There is a lot of work, but the upside is that you build something that it becomes very powerful and can continue the perpetuation of the share values of those companies and owners.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a more. I mean, I guess there's probably several types, right? Obviously, with your Navigator program, you're helping people to position the business to sell and to sell for probably the highest multiplier that they're going to be able to get, at the end of the day, or maybe not the highest multiplier, but at least a strong multiplier. But where I think that this really differs away from your more traditional options, whether that be, well, we'll just talk about private equity specifically, is that you really are staying in control of your own company and getting resources in terms of the buying power, in terms of marketing, buying power, things along those lines, without having to, in essence, give up control of the company or risk losing the culture and the values that were really built along the way. And I really like that it's kind of that best of both worlds, if you will, in terms of PE or franchises, but where you still stay in control and of your business, and that to me seems wonderful.
Yeah, I mean that's really the key is that our members, it's their business. They can decide what they do when they invest, what they sell, who they sell to. That's up to them to decide. We want to provide them with the tools and the resources to be more successful. Um, and that it's a funny thing. We've been approached by private equity groups. They talk about how they're going to add value, and I'm like, I just you need to explain that to me because we've got the fleet discounts with all of the truck vendors. We have the Service Titan discount. We have the um, equipment discount. We have like all of these other things. We've got health and safety, HR. What are you going to bring to this that we don't already have? And
Right.
that was my education in how private equity works. That really they're buying and selling businesses, and they're going to arbitrage. It's a valuation arbitrage. That was new for me. What we want is to give people that are close to the customer control of their business, right? And help them have the resources that the private equity or the consolidated or the corporate kind of companies have. Everything that they have, our members have access to, and they have the control, and they're close to the customer, and they decide how they're going to go to market. And that's what makes us unique and different. And the other thing is that internally in climate care, I mentioned that we love it when we have multi-generational family businesses or multi-generational owners where they've sold to their employees. We've also had a number of occasions where they choose to sell the business to another member, right? And we've had a little bit of internal consolidation where we have a member business buy another member business and either keep that running or they roll it into the existing business. But the opportunity is who you're selling to because you see that person 4 times a year. You reach out to them on emails, you speak to them all the time. And so we have that opportunity internally, whether the business gets bought by the co-op through Navigator or it gets bought by another member company, that opportunity to really coalesce around our core values and take advantage of the services and resources that we provide while deciding what happens to your business today, tomorrow, and ultimately when you sell it.
Well, I think you've got a pretty incredible, value proposition, and it really seems like you're, obviously just adding value beyond, like you said, playing, multiplier arbitrage, right? Buy low, sell high after coming in and consolidating costs and firing half the CSR team, kind of thing. So I think
Yep.
it's a good play. We've talked about marketing a few times, and obviously that's kind of a big topic of this particular podcast. There's marketing from growth through acquisition. What are you seeing out there? I know that you guys do actually some kind of unique things around maintenance. First of all, in terms of how you're marketing, and then I'd really love to know a little bit more about that, and also what you see out there working best for home service contractors, HVAC companies, when it comes to the actual just raw marketing tactics and strategies.
Yeah, so we lead with what we call our We Care plan, and that is an annual maintenance and protection. We have maintenance only protection plans. It's a club membership. It's not unique to us. This is something I think that came out of ISL in the 90s, International Service Leadership. We've just been really diligent to continue to grow this recurring revenue stream. And so I think that part of it is you actually have to deliver the product, right? Some companies think, oh, I'm going to get, $10 a month per piece of equipment. I don't have to do anything. No, you actually have to deliver the service, right? And this is like the challenge, when we're operators first, so we understand the challenge of what it means to grow that kind of a business. And yes, during COVID, having the recurring revenue stream saved many of our member businesses. When the lights turned off across North America, they had a revenue stream that was able to keep their trucks rolling and keep things paid, and it was absolutely huge. It also means that those customers are trusting you. We call it We Care. We really do care about those customers. Many of our member businesses give back a portion of their We Care each month to a local charity. So we get, some great earned media there, but they're really doing it. So one of our companies, Walker Climate Care in Cornwall, which is Eastern Ontario, they do $1 from each maintenance plan per month. So I always know how many maintenance plans they have active. I see how much money did they donate this month. But in the last few years, they've donated over $100,000 to local charities. And so it builds that culture. They pick the teammate of the month gets to decide where it goes. And so they've donated to all kinds of things, women's shelters, addiction centers, the Humane Society. It's run the gambit because it's what their people are passionate about. And so, yeah, they got the big novelty check and they go and they get to deliver it. And they get to feel great that they're giving back to the community. And so internally, that employee of the month, everybody in that team knows, wait, I want my charity, the one that I'm passionate about, to get the We Care check this month. So it pushes people to really excel. And the message to the customers, we're giving back to the local community. And it's not like we're not giving it to some anonymous or some name brand charity that doesn't touch you. We're going to give it back to you in your community, something that really does touch you in your local place. So, because we care, we're members of the community. So what we've realized along the way is that if you can build a successful maintenance program, and it includes more than just maintenance, it's after hours at no additional rate, it's priority dispatch, it's discounts on repairs and replacements, all of those kinds of added value things
Sure.
in the club membership. If you can do that, you can really ring fence your business, right? Every customer that is a maintenance customer is calling us first, and they're probably calling us last. They're not calling anybody else. It is an absolutely incredible program, because what ends up happening is the closing ratio and average ticket on those accounts with those customers is higher than it is with marketed leads. Not by a little bit, by a lot.
Hmm.
Um, it's really easy for this to be
What
destroyed, and we've
just
seen
really
this. Yeah.
really quick, what do you see there as far as, marketing leads, right? SEO, PPC, all that kind of thing versus leading with the maintenance in terms of average ticket?
So in closing ratio, it would be a difference of going for a good comfort advisor, taking marketed leads, depending on the seasonality and how much competition, but let's call it 40 to 50% would be their first time close rate. And on We Care, it's 80 to 90%.
Wow.
So almost double. It's pretty
Yeah.
wild. And then average ticket, again, is significantly higher, thousands of dollars higher. And the reason for that is because we've had the opportunity to be in the home sometimes for 10, 15 years and build a real relationship and become the trusted advisors. This is really easy to screw up. It's really easy when an acquirer buying that business, and we've seen this because some of our businesses have been sold to acquirers who don't share our core values, and people start to flee the what used to be the We Care plan because the acquirer starts to try to harvest all of the customers at the same time. And this is a long-term value play, and it's built on our core values. So what I like to tell customers, and I do this, people come to me, people I know, people I meet at home shows, whatever, and they want to know, should they get a new furnace? And I said, listen, I can't tell you that standing with you here at the home show,
Sure.
but I can tell you that, when was the last time you did maintenance on your equipment? I don't even remember. Okay. So the first thing is let's do a maintenance and let's see. And if your equipment is in decent condition and it can be maintained and keep you going, we're happy to put you into our We Care program and continue like that. We're not going to try to sell you something that you don't need. And one day, and I'm very upfront, one day, and it might be 5 years or 10 years or 15 years from now, that a piece of equipment will need to be replaced. And we want to be there and have built a relationship with you that you can trust us for whatever period of time that is. So when we come to you and say in your preseason maintenance, it's now 15 years old, it's out of warranty. I know the parts for this furnace or air conditioner or heat pump are hard to find at this point. It's working okay, but it could be working better. You might want to consider replacing it before it fails, because when it fails, it's going to be the hottest or coldest day of the year, right?
Right.
And let's do that proactively. And so now we can move those sales into the shoulder season. We can offer that person, we know we're probably going to get a first time close, right? They trust us. We have to value that relationship. We're not hosing them. We're going to give them a fair price. And they're doing us a favor. They're doing it in the shoulder season so that we have capacity to sell to marketed customers during peak season. And if you do this with the long game in mind, then you don't mind waiting 5 years or 10 years. They're paying you to wait. They're going to pay you $10 a month or $20 or $30 a month to wait and come in and do the maintenance each year and wait for that replacement. And so the reason that this is a winning marketing strategy is if you think about Google AdWords, what is the auction look like for furnace replacement during a cold snap? Oh, you're in Utah. What is air
We,
conditioner
we,
or
we
heat
get
pump?
cold here too, by the way. We have a, I mean, it's that's the great thing about Utah and other states kind of around here, right? Idaho, that sort of thing, is that we have both seasons. We
That's
have a
true. Yeah.
hot summer out here in the desert.
Right.
In fact, it's been trailing around 100 degrees for the last several weeks here. And then, we'll get in the negative tens, teens
Mhm.
at night during the winter.
Okay, so
And
our climates aren't. We're in a hot, humid climate. You're in a dry climate. But that seasonality can be brutal for your business, right?
yeah, Ken.
So
Oh yeah,
we call it
it's
we
two
call
it's
it
two humps, right?
it's two
It's a camel with
humps.
two humps.
We
The
call it the
summer
nine
hump
weeks
being
from
bigger
hell.
than the summer hump being bigger than the winter hump. But then
Right.
you're dead in spring and fall.
Exactly. So we've got it's the same thing here. We've got 9 to 12 weeks that happens in the summer, 9 to 12 weeks that happens in the winter. Our sales look like this every year.
Yep.
And what we try to do with We Care is move more of those into the shoulder season, right? And even out the humps. The humps are still going to happen, but we try to use it as a fill in, and not just like, oh, we're going to run 1,000 maintenances and run it. No, slow down, go slow. Look for is this the last thing we want is you go and do the maintenance and 90 days later the thing breaks during the season, right? So we want our guys to slow down and really look. And it's not like, oh, we're going to look and like change 1,000 capacitors. That's not the plan. The plan is deliver real value. So we're going to go, yes, we're going to change the filter, change the UV bulb, change the humidifier pad, whatever it is. So there's the consumable revenue. But it's really about, okay, we've got a piece of equipment that's out of warranty. Parts are hard to come by for this, especially after COVID. And, Mrs. Jones, you should really think about replacing it before you run into a problem, and we can help with that. And that's the opportunity. So when you market for, when you're, what that Google AdWords auction looks like at the height of your heating or cooling season for box replacement lead, could be hundreds of dollars, right? And so that's a very expensive lead. And if it's costing you, I don't know what it is in your market. In our market, $300 to $500 is kind of what we were hitting, Canadian dollars.
I would say that's pretty. It's probably fairly accurate here too. It's you're going to spend three to $500
Right.
is pretty typical.
Just to make the phone ring, right? And what percentage? One ring. And so, the whole team has to be dialed into, okay, that phone rang. My director of business development and implementation, he calls it the three rings to success. So Glenn, if you listen to this, here I am touting the three rings again. Make the phone ring, make the doorbell ring, make the cash register ring, right?
I like
And
that.
and the conversion at each point is not going to be 100%, right? So you're going to get the phone to ring. How successful are your CSRs at booking that call for the CA? How many, the CA's got to cross the threshold. That's a comfort advisor. It's got to cross the threshold of the home. Okay. They've got to make the pitch, and then they got to close. And from the time you start to the time you end, what did it actually cost you with all the breakage along the way? It didn't cost you $300 to $500. It could have cost you $2,000.
Yep.
Right? Easy by the time you're done.
Easy. Yeah.
And so that's a very expensive way to grow your business. If you're well capitalized private equity, then you can come into a market and you can burn through tons of cash and do that. If you are more patient, if you're owner operated, if you're capitalized and you've got patient capital, then you can play the long game. And the long game is ring fence your business by developing a maintenance program and market in the shoulder seasons for maintenance. And then you're going to treat those customers like gold, right? You've got to just service the hell out of them, because you want to retain them, because you're playing a 5 to 15 year game now.
You're going from the initial transaction in terms of how you're calculating your ROI to really looking at the lifetime value of each and every customer.
It's all about the life cycle, 100%.
Yep.
And when we're successful and we've got these, businesses that have been around for 30, 40, 50, some of our businesses 70 years, and you've replaced the furnace in that home or the HVAC equipment in that home 2 or 3 times, right? What is the lifetime value of that customer? It's absolutely incredible, right? And some homes have multiple systems, right? So this is, the secret sauce is building that program. You've got the recurring revenue. You're getting paid to wait. Be patient. Treat the customer really well. And I think a lot of folks misunderstand. If this is done well, how do we market it? I'm giving away a lot of secrets here, but that's okay. It's harder to implement than people think. So if you're listening to this podcast in Ontario or Canada and you think it's a good idea, happy to talk about how to do it. But we advertise, for example, a $59.99 tune-up. That's Canadian. We advertise it almost in all of our locations year round. And I sometimes see small guys, attack online. How can anybody do it? That's less than it costs to actually roll a truck. And they just don't understand. They're right. They don't understand the math.
It's a loss leader.
It is a loss leader. Well, it is, and it isn't, because what we do is what is the cost to acquire a maintenance customer? It's not $300 to $500. It's much, much less, right? Much less. So that's the first piece. The second piece is that if you look at it as marketing spend to get in the door, then you've just been subsidized $60, right? So whatever that lead costs you to get somebody into that house, the customer's just paid you $60 to be there, right? Sure. So you can take that right off the top. The other part is, and we say this, it's on the ads, when you sign up for our WeCare plan. So the $59.99 gets you there. It gets you that initial maintenance when you sign up for our WeCare plan, which means that you're going to sign up for $10 a month, basically per piece of equipment. There's a discount for multiple pieces. But the truth of the matter is, after the first year, they paid us $60 to walk in. They paid us $10 a month. It's basically the same as if we had gone and done a one-time maintenance.
Right.
The challenge is that you have to have the logistics and the process in place to be able to run it. And that's where a lot of companies really struggle. They think this is a great idea, but they can't figure out how to do it. And that's what we bring, is that we've got a process for how to do it.
I love that. And I'm thinking back to, I mean, the idea of maintenance programs is not new in HVAC, right? I think most companies have picked this up, and I'm thinking about one of our clients in particular that even just, gosh, probably 3 years ago was picking up the phone in the spring and in the fall, right? Calling up all of their membership. Hey, let's get you set up for the tune up, right? And just going from picking up the phone and calling to doing text message campaigns automatically, changed the whole game, right? I mean, just automatically changed the whole game. And so, um, perhaps the topic of your process is becomes a downloadable
No, you're
information
100%
product
right.
at some point in the future. But I think that there is a point that they do work, right. And I think that your strategy of let's focus on the maintenance, let's focus on getting in the door for the tune-ups. I think most HVAC companies, or at least the ones that we've worked with a lot, do understand that, hey, in addition to having that steady stream of recurring income and developing trust and rapport and everything else, it's getting our technicians back in the house twice a year, just like going to the dentist. And then they can make those recommendations for system change outs, or they can make those recommendations for humidifiers, probably not where you're at.
Yeah, no,
But
we do humidifiers. It's dry in the winter.
dehumidifiers. Yeah. So,
I'd love to sell more dehumidifiers in the
yeah.
summer for sure.
You
We
know,
could use them.
out here we're trying to sell the humidifiers because it's just dry, It's but there's all sorts of indoor air quality products that and solutions that most people don't even realize are available,
Hmm.
that are great, upsells, cross sells. And again, I think it is really about looking at that lifetime value, as opposed to, geez, are we getting a front end ROI off of our marketing? Because you won't. I mean, you won't.
You're 100% right. I mean, if you're in a market of 100,000 people, it's very funny. Regardless of which member I look at, when I ask them to draw the territory that they service, it always comes out to about 150,000 people, except if they're in Toronto where there's 5 million people, so it's hard to do that.
Right.
But in many cases, 150. So you can have a very nice $10 million business with 150,000 population if you develop maintenance contracts and you can acquire 10-20% of the market.
Yep.
They're calling you first. You become the trusted name in that town, and that is a real opportunity to get that, like you said, that recurring revenue and eventually the equipment replacement. And listen, 65% of our revenue is still equipment replacements, but it's the economic engine of the business is the we care plan. That's the heart of the business model because it leads to everything else. And really, the question is, whenever we acquire a customer, the conversation is how do we turn them into a we care customer, right? So if it's a break fix, then and they join the club, then they get a discount today, right? And we want to get them on into that. If they're calling for maintenance, it's about becoming part of the maintenance, becoming part of the we care. If they're buying equipment, we sign them up into we care, right? And in order for them to get an extended labor warranty, for example, or an extended parts warranty, they need to be a we care member. And part of that is ring fencing the business. Part of it is also if you've been an operator for any period of time, longer than 2 seasons, then you know that when it breaks 3, 4, 5 years later and it hasn't been maintained, the customer is going to say, this thing that you just installed for me is broken, right? You're going to be going back and you have a disgruntled customer. So you may as well solve that on the front end by bundling in not just a warranty program, but bundling in the maintenance, right? You're going to get your car maintained. You need to get your HVAC maintained in order to make sure it's running optimally. And then we can catch things before they break.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you really look at it too, at the end of the day, people don't plan out in advance. They're not thinking about their HVAC equipment. There's a reason that people, a certain amount of people are going to bite on a free tune-up offer.
Yep.
But
Absolutely.
the overwhelming majority of your click traffic, of your phone traffic, everything else is going to be the first time it hits 90 degrees outside.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden you've got no air and it becomes an emergency situation.
That's 100%. So that lead of this is the other thing is that so many people are they've got wishful thinking. It's not working. They don't want to replace it. So what they want to do is to see, well, if I got a maintenance, would that solve the problem? Maybe it just needs a maintenance. Fine. Sign up for a maintenance plan. We'll come out and do a maintenance and we'll tell you this is beyond maintenance, right? It's a great opportunity to get in front of that customer. But if it is something that we can maintain or we can fix, then we've saved them a huge expense today, and we've gotten their trust because other guys are going to go in there. There's blood in the water, and they're going to try to take the whole thing down. And we're more patient than that, right? It's not about we're going to do what's in the best interest of the customer today. That's the long-term value proposition. So, yeah, converting those clicks, but and this is the part also, Adam, that's really important for folks that are going to try to do this on their own is understand that the maintenance can also be a massive liability, right? Because you are taking money from people for a service you have not provided yet. If you're doing this on a monthly with annual maintenance, then you're getting paid in advance of doing the maintenance, which means you have a liability. So you better be putting funds aside on your books, on your P&L and balance sheet that you're reserving those funds to do the maintenance because it's going to come up that the maintenance has to be done. Now, the other thing you need to do is really plan your labor force because if you don't do the maintenance, if you don't do the maintenance as early as possible, you're going to get a tsunami of people that need maintenance done when it gets hot. And the worst is when you have a customer, a maintenance customer who's been paying you and they haven't had their annual maintenance done and there's a problem. Now your whole value proposition has been upset, right?
Right.
So it's really key to understand, how much labor do you need per thousand maintenance contracts? And are you able to deploy that according to the seasonality of your market? And this is what's really important is I don't know, how quickly it gets hot and cold in Utah. In Ontario, it's like flipping a switch, right? So um, in the spring, you know, March and April are typically pretty cool, and May things start to warm up. Now this year was a little bit weird; it didn't get hot until June, but you basically, to do a proper maintenance, you got to be above 50 degrees Fahrenheit, right? To do an AC maintenance, you're going to put a jacket on it, condenser jacket on it, but you want it to be at least 50 degrees Fahrenheit to be doing that work, 12 degrees Celsius, and the amount of time that we have between it being 12 Celsius and being 21 Celsius when the air conditioning needs to start turning on is a very short window.
Sure.
And so we have to make sure that we are really diligent to get it stuff done. And on the heating side, it's the same thing. October, things will start to cool off very quickly, and we'll go into cooling season within 4 to 6 weeks. We're going to go from turning off the air conditioning for the last time to turning on the furnace, and you've got a lot of maintenance to do after Labor Day, basically.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll tell you, Victor, this has been just absolutely fascinating, and I've been in this business for a while, but I love that I can still run into people like you that have these ideas and different strategies and things that educate me, and I'm sure educate our listeners as well. So I really appreciate you sharing as much as you have and on kind of what the secret sauce is there for climate care anyway.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, Adam. It was my pleasure, and I really do love spreading the information about cooperatives, the cooperative mentality. While we're planning on staying to this side of the border fence, border hedge, we like to call it. If there's anybody in the States that's like, you know what, I'd be interested in starting up a co-op, I'm always happy to chat and see what we can do to help people in the industry move things forward. So thanks so much for having me out.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure, and again, friends, I've been joined by Viktor Hyman from Climate Care out of Toronto, Ontario. My name is Adam Loveridge with Blue Forge Marketing, and we are based out of Lehi, Utah. This has been another edition of the Home Services Marketing Growth to Acquisition podcast, and I look forward to catching you on the next one.